Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Embracing Equity in Management and Leadership event hosted by CMI Asia-Pacific. My name is Samantha, and I am the International Regional Board Coordinator at CMI, and I will be shortly handing over to Professor Dr. Rebecca to begin today's event. If you have any questions during the digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A session today. The session today will be recorded and will be shared with you later today for those who book to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. Now over to Professor Dr. Rebecca Taylor, Deputy Chair of CMI Malaysia Regional Board, to begin the event.
Thank you, Samantha, and welcome to everyone who has joined us today for this event on embracing equity in management and leadership. We have three excellent panel members with us today to discuss why equal opportunities aren't enough. People start from different places, so true inclusion and belonging requires equitable action. In terms of business performance, research from PwC, which is also referenced in the CMI's The Everyone Economy report, states that Fortune 500 companies with the highest representation of women board members obtain significantly higher financial performance than those with lower representation. So today, we're going to explore with our panel the issue of equity and equality. What are some of the biggest barriers faced by women? How can we better support the equity equality agenda? What is the role of upskilling? And issues related to ageism, current employment policies, and mentoring. So to start the discussion, I would like to introduce our three panelists. The first is Sarah Tan, PR and Media Chair, UNESCO Hong Kong Association Global Peace Center. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The second panel member is Dr. Thisara Jayawardene, Head of the Department of Industrial Management and Director of the Business Research Unit at the Faculty of Business, University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka. Welcome, Thisara.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And third is Manoj Menon, Founder and the Managing Director of Twimbit Singapore. Welcome, Manoj.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Excellent.
Good morning, good evening, everyone.
Great to see you all. So what I'm going to do is, by way of introduction and to set the foundation for our discussion today, I was wondering if you could each briefly explain your interest in equity in management and leadership. So through your different lenses and experience, just say what brings you to the table today. So why don't we start with Sarah?
Sure, of course. So I have been working in CSR and corporate communications for over 2 decades now. And more recently, I support a lot of nonprofits, startups, and also other organizations in innovation and impact investment. I have always been very passionate to create, work with other stakeholders to create a more inclusive economy. I have worked with NGOs and social enterprises on women empowerment, peace building, and workforce development. So the topic is very timely, and I really, I'm very honored to be on this panel to discuss this topic with everybody. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Thisara, how about your response to that?
Yeah, I think the terms equality and equity, especially as a lawyer for me, are often mistaken and used interchangeably without knowing, I think, the true meaning. In the workplace, equality, let's say, means providing all employees with the same rules, privileges, and benefits by not tailoring to specific individual needs. And so workplace equality can result in unfairness in the workplace environment. Whereas equity requires that there's this distribution of resources and opportunities, which is customized across a group of population to ensure that no subset or a particular group is often disadvantaged and they achieve to the maximum potential. So this equity in the workplace environment strives to identify the specific requirements of the employees including the specific needs and particular or personal identities for them, whether it's gender or race. And so there's more greater workplace diversity and equity are greatly associated. So since I work for females, especially women in need, in my legal work that I do, and especially somebody who advocates women empowerment and who has done the higher studies in women in entrepreneurship, I think this is very timely, and this is especially when we just had the International Women's Day. It's the right thing to do that we speak about equity and this, the equality for all women, especially, and if not the minorities of other different groups.
Excellent. Dasara, thank you very much. And let me move now to Manoj. What brings you to this discussion? What's your experience?
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. I founded Twimbit. I spent about 2 decades working and leading a management consulting firm in this region. And we founded Twimbit as a new age research firm to support the changing needs of this world. Our mission is to empower every organization and every individual to be the best they can be. Be more is what we aspire to be. And I want to help others. Firstly, we want to build a role model organization ourselves. And then we want to set that as an example for other organizations and support them in their cause. And that is what I hope to add color and share perspectives on how I see companies doing it, how we are doing it ourselves.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. So I hope that that's given our audience just a real sense of the 3 panelists today. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to maneuver us through a selection of questions just to really get your views, thoughts, experience on the different aspects of equity in management and leadership. And I thought that it would be interesting to actually start with a submitted question from our participants, which is a question from Paula. And Paula would really like to understand your views on, in theory and practice, on the meaning of the terms equality, equity, and ethical. Now, Dasara, you actually addressed a little bit of that in your introduction, and that's great. But why don't I turn to Sarah now and just say, what's your definition of those terms?
Yeah. Equality, I think we've talked about it for many, many years. That we are providing equal opportunity for everybody, no matter the gender, the race, and different backgrounds. But equity really means that people are not starting from the same place. So we have to take different circumstances and situation into the table and manage the different expectations so that everybody can succeed based on their personal efforts and not social status or other status. So equity is really something that is more challenging, I'll have to say, that it takes a lot of effort into understanding the different situations and different demands. And ethical, I think business have been looking at business ethics for a long time from a lot of different perspectives. It can be from a legal perspective, it can also be ethical perspective. And a lot of companies have already got their code of conduct and, they have different governance and policies to help them to become a better corporate citizens. But in terms of practice and theory, I think there's still a big gap, especially on this area. It's because I think the expectation of companies and businesses to be more human-centric is becoming more important nowadays, especially after COVID. And people are looking more and more into the ESG practices of companies. So how do companies actually put what they say into practice and provide a good working environment for people? How do they actually help the society and their community? It's actually the people are really, really looking into that. So that's my take into these different aspects. And companies are increasingly putting more effort into creating more awareness internally and as well as articulating their own efforts externally. So that's my thinking.
Super, Sarah, thank you. Manoj, what would your take on that be?
I think Dr. Tesara and Sarah talked about equity and equality fairly well. Let me dwell a bit more on the ethical part. Right? One of the things I'm super passionate about is about helping people build purpose-driven businesses. Now, when you go back to think about how businesses were initially set up, the purpose of a business was to serve society. Somewhere along the way, business have become very capitalistic. The purpose of a business is to make profit. It only serves really, despite all the talk by all the world's biggest companies. Sad to say, when things go tough, the purpose of business is to serve shareholders. Yeah, everybody till 12 months ago, post COVID, everybody was talking about being how employee centric they are. When things really became tough, the first things to let go were the employees. Yeah, and these are some of the world's biggest companies in this world. So, I truly want, one of the areas of passion for me is to help build stakeholder-centric businesses. How can we build a business when we say equity or equality and ethical? Can we build a business which serves all stakeholders in equal measure? That means serves employees, customers, partners, suppliers, and the society, and give equal weightage to each of them. So we serve these stakeholders in equal measure. Then we are talking about truly building a purpose-built business. Yeah.
So, Manoj, if I stay with you and we just move away from the kind of definitions and we look at today across the workplace, different sectors, what would you say are one or two of the biggest challenges or barriers in equity in the workplace? In this case, maybe specifically for women.
Yeah, the big challenge. If you look at, I think we all do a reasonably good job in the starting of businesses. Today we are a very young business. We have about 60 employees today. And I was just checking before the call, I checked with my colleagues, hey, what is the ratio of men and women in the business? And we are about 40% women, which is good. I would have liked it to be higher, but I think clearly we haven't done enough there. But where the challenge is, as companies grow, and you look at the bigger companies, there is serious lack of leadership talent in women in senior positions in companies. For me, telecoms is a big clientele. And I look at telecom companies in the region, forget about the leadership teams, even the boards do not have enough women representation. Right? So these are some of the biggest companies in every single country. And we struggle to have women in senior positions to drive. And as you alluded from the PwC survey earlier, clearly the benefits are there. It is no longer just a discussion about how much benefit it brings to companies. So yeah, I think that is a single biggest challenge, that how do we make sure we have enough women leaders in senior positions, right from starting from the boards to C and C-1 levels in every organization, is a serious challenge that companies haven't addressed fully, at least in the Asia-Pacific region.
Thank you, Manoj. So that's going to set the scene actually for a question that's coming up quite soon. But actually, let's just stay with that and look at one or two of the biggest barriers. At the start, what would you identify as one or two of the biggest barriers?
I can speak a lot on that, Rebecca, because despite some significant gains over the past several decades, the Sri Lankan women face many challenges in the workplace. Gender equality is a struggle for Sri Lankan women and girls, and these cultural stereotypes. Then there's the structural barriers at the workplace, the financial issues, political, legal issues, all are actually contributing. Because when you look at the nation, only 1/3 of nation's paid labor force is made up of the women. The latest CEO was only hired in 2020. Though we claim that in 1960, world's first female prime minister was from Sri Lanka, still to date, we have the most voters. More than half the population is women, but still, unfortunately, the decision makers, the parliament, is not even having 5% of female representation. So it's very sad when it comes to gender equality. So going back to your main question of the barriers, if I may look at the Sri Lankan workforce, there's this what society expects, the social norms governing, childcare, elderly care, housework. These things are designed as women's jobs, and they are, one of the largest barriers that I can see, because even end of the civil war, which was ended, the gender roles have only become more entrenched. I mean, only 40% of women of childbearing marriageable age say that they have family responsibilities, and then they don't want to be employed. That is one reason. Then there's discrimination in hiring, promotion, and pay, because gender discrimination in hiring is one of the main barriers for females coming into workforce. Because I remember one female architect said that she knew two established architect firms that didn't hire females at all. This happens in diverse sectors as IT or accounting. And then there's sexual harassment at the workplace. There's sexism. It doesn't have to be necessarily physically harassing someone. It's just the undertone of sexism, or in terms of jokes, or unsolicited flirting, or uninvited commentary about a woman's personal life, whether she's married or if she's married, does she have children, and all sorts of this kind of harassment. Then there's this educational and occupational streaming, because women start streaming into these arts and related humanities type of studies. Most of them, when you look at our university, only I think 19% of the engineering students are females. Rest are males. I think it's common for everywhere. Even when I studied in New Zealand, the Auckland University, the statistics were the same. So the females who get into arts, even though they do graduate, getting employment in those arts fields and humanities are very hard for them. That is one of the other reasons. And then we see the legal and financial administrative barriers, because there are so many laws that are passed that are not really catering to the they are not really friendly for women to keep working. There's poorly designed discriminatory regulatory systems that rob women from these employment opportunities. So I mean, those are on top of the head the 5 main reasons that I can see that's happening in the female labor market in Sri Lanka.
Okay, thank you very much. And Sarah, what would you define as the 1 or 2 biggest barriers to equity in the workplace?
Right. I think gender bias and stereotypes start at a very young age. So, before we talk about, women getting into the workforce, I think Dr. Firisara already mentioned that when they are in education, when they're growing up, there's already a lot of cultural stereotypes and biases. So quality education and better governance can definitely help to lower some of these barriers. But I think, with that as the backdrop, there are 3, challenges I think that women are facing. First is the confidence level of women. So they grow up, they were groomed into certain type of girls in different cultures and settings. And a lot of them actually do not have the confidence level needed at senior roles. So when they progress in the workplace, they actually experience a lot of different struggles. And men typically, have a different tone and also the way of dealing with those kind of situation. But women really need to be educated at a very young age. How do they deal with that? And how do they compete with another gender? And how do they compete in different situations? I think that's one thing, to build up that confidence level from a very young age. Second, I think it's groupthink. Because of the domestic duties at home, a lot of women, especially in Asia, they are caretakers. They are, they are doing a lot of unpaid domestic duties, and that results in an imbalanced workforce. That means that there are always, most of the time, more men than women at senior or managerial positions. So how do we actually help to break down stereotypes when there's so many groupthink situation where a lot of men are already making the decision, they are already talking in a certain way? So how do we make sure that we break those biases. I think that's very important. And then the third is really to offer women with real leadership opportunities. I can't remember which survey, but it's a recent one from a management consultancy. They talked about women being mentored too much, but not sponsored enough. So, everybody, smiled, and I think you know what I meant, because everybody think that women needs to be mentored, because they lack the confidence, maybe they don't have the opportunity, they don't know how to get the opportunity, so let's mentor them. But really, they want sponsorship. They want people to speak up for them. They want to be offered higher pay. They want to be acknowledged of their value. So it's not that they are just praised for the great work that they've done, but really being appreciated with real value. So I think that's three things that if we can really look into it closely, then we can at least lower some of these barriers for women in the workforce.
That is a great collection of barriers for us to explore through the questions, because we're really going to be looking for some solutions, some ideas, some solutions. How do things change? And Manoj, I'm going to start with what you said about the board. I'm just going to look at that data. But Sarah, I have to say, just to pause for a moment, when you made that last comment, it just took me right back to some experiences that I had where I kept hearing, oh no, the reason that there are no women in the leadership roles is because they need to be developed. We need to develop them. And we were thinking, actually, I don't think they do all need to be developed. I think they're there. I think what they need is the support. They need that commitment to sort of equity and equality. They need that to be part of the culture. And then actually what we'll see is progress. So yeah, when you said that, it just really took me back to some experiences that I remembered as well. But actually, so moving on in our questioning, I just wanted to come back to a little bit of that research and just say, so a little bit of data here, McKinsey, which states that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity on executive teams were 25% more likely to experience above average profitability. It's a little bit of research done by McKinsey. And then to repeat what I said earlier from PwC, that Fortune 500 companies with the highest representation of women board members obtained significantly higher financial performance than those with lower representation. So those are only two little bits of research there. But Manoj, it really touches on what you said about women in leadership. So what would you say managers and leaders can do to create a working environment that really fosters equality, supports equity, and allows for some of those changes to start being made?
Yeah, sure. I think the data is there, and people publish these researches. I don't think there is a shortage of data which proves the value of diversity to help build a sustainable business. In fact, I'm reading this book by Simon Sinek, and I'm super inspired by it. He talks about the infinite game, right? And in this, he talks about how we should not focus on the battles of today, but play an infinite game for the future. So the moment we understand what that truly means, then we are not, because it is true that it is, women play different roles. You help us bring up families, and then you lose some of your very precious years at that time, being unable to contribute effectively to business. You decide to take a gap, but we don't do enough to bring them back into the system. How do we support them and enable them to bring them back into the system and encourage them and make it work? I think very few companies, very few corporations in this part of the world actually do enough to do that. So while the information is there, I think we do not celebrate enough of best practices in making this possible. I think number two, our leaders here are not held accountable to it. Who is held accountable for not making this possible? All this research is there, I think it is time either the governments or regulators get in for and enforce it. If we are so serious about it, are we really serious about it, or are we going to talk about it? So I think while I believe education is important, I think it is also holding people accountable. As leaders, we become accountable for it if we do agree this is something important that we need to do. But while I say these two things, I'm super excited because we are in an environment where technology is making a lot of new things really possible. It is no longer about how many hours of effort you put in. It is about what you can really contribute. The hard work can be done by ChatGPT, right? As long as you have the intelligence and you have the ability to solve real problems in a meaningful manner. And that's where I believe, looking ahead, I'm quite excited that we will see a lot more potential impact that women will play, and they will grow faster into many leadership positions. Uh, in this part of the world.
Excellent, thank you. And Sarah, what would your take be on that? How do we create that environment that really fosters more equality and equity?
Yeah, I've mentioned ESG just now, but I think I would, again focus on that because only with the correct governance structure would we be able to effect change. So I think the current ESG practices and also the different accounting frameworks that account for the impact that companies are creating would change the scene quite dramatically. The companies have put a lot of efforts in in the past, in the environmental efforts, carbon neutrality, net zero and things like that. But S, the social part is really difficult to measure and difficult to really create real impact. And the different measurements is also another challenge for companies. But I think, again, investors, employees, and business partners, they're asking businesses to be more creative and innovative in making sure that they're not just talking the talk, but really, doing something to address these issues. So in order to really bring that into the picture, I think, companies need to really create a lot of power and also energy within their organizations to creating social impact in their community. So that could be, for example, education and training, better governance. I mentioned it could be from recruiting, more women staff from junior positions to appointing, women board members. It could be around practices on hiring and training. So there's a range of things around governance that the companies can do. And then the third, definitely, it's increase the diversity and provide equal opportunity for women. But I think that there's so much to be done, around ESG, that there's quite a lot that the companies are already doing, but probably in a very, very diverse manner that you can't see and feel the real impact in society yet. But more to be done, I guess.
Excellent, Sarah, thank you. And Sarah, I don't want to leave you out of the how do we now start addressing some of these things very proactively and creating that inclusive environment, because you raised a number of barriers when you were talking earlier. So I'm just going to combine a couple of questions that have come in from our participants. One is from Ying. It's quite a broad question, which is just how do you develop that inclusive culture? So I thought maybe you could just say something in relation to the barriers that you pointed out. But I'm actually going to throw in something else. And I know that we're talking about women, and because this is related to sort of International Women's Day, etc. But actually, there's an interesting question that's come in from Mark, just to say that with transgender individuals becoming a separate entity in society as well, like how do they fit into equality? So maybe just broadening that, because inclusive is inclusive, but how do we make sure that we're actually addressing the equality, equity, inclusivity more broadly?
I think, Rebecca, that this inequality has somewhat contributed for the economic crisis that we are facing as well, because as I mentioned before this, we require this females participation in the workforce, and if we don't make use of 50% of the population, obviously the economy is going to downfall. And as you said, having the transgender community as well, I mean, what I have seen in Sri Lanka particularly, that we see them in the fashion industry, in beauty industry, we do see them, that their participation is there, but the acceptance from the society is where these barriers are coming from. Even as I said before, it's a barrier for the cultural attitudes for women to go to the workforce. I mean, sometimes when a woman wants to go to the workforce, her own husband or her own families will harass her, or sometimes the neighbors will have gossip about her. So that kind of attitude needs to change. That a working woman is not a measure, or to say that she's not competent enough to be a good mother. That whole attitude change has to be done. Then of course with that, the pay has to be equal. That really definitely makes in terms of promotions, in terms of even using public services for commuting, women are getting harassed. Women are not getting. We can talk later, I suppose, on the legal sides of it, like how this the maternity leave and things, how discriminative they are for some of the workers. I mean, depending upon how many number of children you have, and with the part-time, the option of not having the ability to work part-time or to work on a contract or consultant type of work, simply because the employees prefer to have someone 8 to 5, and they don't really require these women to go earlier to pick kids from daycare or to look after or to nurse them perhaps. So those things have to change. And then the complete culture or the attitudes of the people in terms of these harassments, whether it's transgender, whether it's for women, sometimes even for men, I'm sure they do feel the same, that in terms of their the way they look or the way they dress or the way their political opinions even. So that the lack of safety, lack of affordable, accessible transport, those things really matter. And then even in education, I think, like when we let the little girls, when we tell them that, oh, you should play with dolls, you should just keep your nails clean, and the boys should continue with the toys and trucks, that really pushes the boys towards this engineering related, technological related, innovative types of education, whereas the girls find it very novel when they all of a sudden go to the university, and then they feel that, oh, now we have to innovate something, start something with the hands on. So that type of this attitude, that gender biasness, has to be stopped if you really want the workforce to be gender equal. It has to start from the childhood, because even I've seen my little boy in the nursery, he's been told, oh, you can't do dancing with the girls, it's for girls. I mean, then my boy loves dancing and he wants to dance with his sister. So that type of things have to be stopped, and we have to encourage even the dressing, that certain the women should dress this way, men should be that, if we can really eliminate that, then move to the legal parts and ensure that there are policies to protect the women and the transgender, I suppose we can ensure equality for everybody at workplaces.
Excellent. Thank you. And actually, you touched on education there, and that links to a question that we've had from Hillary, which is, how does the education system need to change in order to really build in that culture of learning how to compete with other genders in the workplace? So I'm just wondering, from there's an input there, but there's also an output. And Sarah, I was wondering if you could comment on that. Like, what would you see as what needs to change? You made some interesting comments about expectations on investors, or investors' expectations actually, and the governance structures and things like that. What would you say needs to change in order to see some real results here?
I think if we, look at the education system in general, it's very behind compared to other industry, how they evolved. Interestingly, I was sitting on one of the committees on features of education for UNESCO last year. in the previous few years, we were looking at the skills needed for tomorrow. So to build a more sustainable world, a more equal world, a more just world. And interestingly, our education system, it's not really catering to that need for the future. And what is needed is not just equality or gender diversity or all the other things. It's actually how do we fundamentally look at education in terms of bringing up the characteristics and also the skill sets needed. So it's not gender-based, it's not cultural-based, it's really solution-based. So what are the challenges we are facing around the world, and how do we use education and the facilities and the knowledge that we generate as humanity to help to solve those challenges? And that would go back to some of the things that we've talked about in terms of changing that perspective and some of the mindset of people, changing culture and some of the old perceptions and really embedding that into the education system, which is very difficult, I think. There's a lot of challenges in education already because of COVID. We've lost quite a few years in certain location to educate the people that would go into the workforce. Usually those are critical years before they go to work. They are in college, or they might be in university, they might be in vocational training. And they lost those chances to develop their social skills, for example, to understand each other, to really switch off the phone and switch off the technology and really to work with people. So I think the education system have to evolve in a lot of different ways, no matter it's the curriculum design, no matter it's the channel, the places to learn. They have to evolve so that it's more inclusive and diverse in different aspects.
Thank you very much. And one of the things that people clearly need are real allies within their, on their journey, through their experiences. So Manoj, I was going to come to you and ask, how important are those allies? And maybe have you seen one or two experiences of where having allies through that journey really has helped?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I just wanted to add to what Sarah was saying. Uh, while we change and work with the education system, I think the bigger challenge is also all the teachers themselves. All the teachers who taught me were women. I remember 80-90% of teachers in most parts of the world are women. And I think they themselves need to be potentially educated on how, because they are influencing all the women around them, and subconsciously they pick up careers in different disciplines. So I just wanted to add that. And Rebecca, going to your question about allies, I think allies play such an important role in being strong influencers, in being in pushing through the message. I must admit, several years ago in my previous firm, we struggled to have enough women in leadership position. In partnership, I work for a consulting firm, and we had about 16 odd partners. All 16 were men, and the chairman was he was quite disturbed one day, and he insisted that we need to change this. And it was difficult because we did not have enough people within the system to be able to work towards fulfilling and driving this. And he took it upon himself. He challenged the norm, and we made it a priority to accelerate the careers of several people and bring them onto the leadership team. And it was because he was a champion for it. He stood for it. He fought for it, and he was willing to fight that battle and go through that entire system, because obviously there are many people who would seriously object to it, say, hey, maybe she's not ready for it, maybe she. But so you need allies, you need champions, you need spokesperson to be able to do it. And I can see several people who are great examples in doing it. So we need to build and groom many of these people. who can support. Now, if it doesn't happen from within, then we got to bring them from outside to come and support organization to make that change. So, while I may not have enough women leaders who can inspire the women leaders of my company today, I should be able to bring people from outside to inspire them, to support them, to guide them, to make that possible. So these are some of the simple, small things that organizations of different sizes can follow through to make this possible. Yeah, Rebecca, you're on mute, Rebecca. Yeah.
So Manoj, I'm going to stay with you for a minute and just ask a little bit on a different topic of ageism. So, we're looking at what do some of these kind of discriminations look like? And actually, in terms of ageism, David, one of our participants has asked a very interesting question about ageism, which is, what role does that play in actually selecting leaders? And he puts that in the context of, if you're excluding people who are too old, and then you might be excluding people who are too young, and then you're adding in the fact that there are issues with gender, culture, other barriers as well, you're left with actually quite a small pool. And that in itself is a huge barrier to success. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that from your perspective, and maybe give one or two ideas as to how do we get over that?
Yeah, it is a real challenge, and in today's context and business environment, over the last 3 months, I suspect globally, we have seen a wave of layoffs, and a majority of these layoffs, people have, if you're in the age bracket of 50 and above, it is very likely that you would get laid off, and in many of these tech companies around the world. How do people now get back into the workforce? It is and if you're a woman, then I guess maybe the challenge is even more amplified. So I think it is a really big challenge, right? But the good news on the other end is work is changing. The nature of work is changing. How we do work is changing. So I'm quite excited that there are so many flexible work arrangements that are coming into play. So while I do not have the bandwidth and the capability, we are a small business with 50 people. We don't have the bandwidth and capability to hire a very senior leader and pay for them full time, but we now have the bandwidth and capability to pick up buckets of their time to support us. So these kind of new business models where flexible working hours, flexible contractual agreements, ability to work on piecemeal projects, I think they are becoming slowly the norm. So that is one great way that we see organizations are beginning to deal with it and bring in people of different diverse experiences together to solve these challenges. So as much as the average age in my organization, excluding me, is 25, but we do have a pool of 15 other people who are actually helping us with their knowledge on specific assignments where we can pool their skills. So, and this is, I think, slowly becoming the norm in many, many businesses. So that's one example of a real case study, and not limited to a geography, not limited to an industry. You can adapt it around the world. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And Sarah, at the beginning of that question, you were sort of nodding as I got to, the pool. When you add all these barriers, the pool is actually quite small. And so, do you have any ideas of how does that going forward?
So you were breaking up a little bit at the end, but I think just leveraging on the comments earlier, I think I can take Hong Kong as an example because we are a financial center in Asia and the world, and we have we have quite a number of big companies listed in Hong Kong, but we have a very, very challenging situation is that most of the bigger conglomerates and listed companies in Hong Kong, they have all male boards. So it's like, you look around and, it's the same question. Do we not have enough women, or, do we not have, enough opportunity for them? But interestingly, when the think tanks and the social enterprises and the NGOs do the surveys and the governments themselves do consultation paper, they realize that it's because they don't need to do that, and that's why they going back to their routines to find senior leaders, and usually it's the middle age and senior management or senior management who would go onto boards. So they last year, and I'm really proud of what the government have done, is that they've changed the new rule, changed a rule. So that all the new companies who are going to list in Hong Kong, they will have to have at least one female director on their boards. If it's all male boards, that they vice versa, they will have to have at least one woman. And the existing listed entities, they are given a 3-year window to comply. So that means that by maybe 2 years later, because they will have been effective for some time, then all of the listed companies in Hong Kong, be they big or small, they will have to have at least one woman on their board. And that will create 1,300 board seats for women in Hong Kong. And it's a big effect, because when you have more women, again, is tackling the groupthink challenge, that more women will be talking about how do they bring in more women at different levels of seniority. That means that you're changing the whole pipeline, you're changing the whole scene in the workforce. And I think that would be very interesting in a few years to see how it changed non-listed companies, women entrepreneurs, and also different flexible working for women, because that would change the whole pipeline and the thinking about how women can actually do their work. So that's very interesting.
That really is, and thank you for those examples, both of you, because I think that really gets us to think about it in this context of how do we move forward, not just identifying that yes, this is a problem, but actually what are some of the proactive things that can be done and are being done in order to move forward. So Sarah, I think we have you back. I think there's a little bit of an IT glitch there. We have you back, so I want to come to you now and just ask you, how do you think microaggressions negate positive steps towards equity and equality? So just maybe give some examples or some experience of that. I think we might still have a technical problem. Sarah, can you hear us? Can you hear me? No, we can't hear you, I'm afraid. So why don't let's see if we can resolve that. Maybe Samantha can try and resolve that issue with you, and I'll come back to you with to ask you a little bit about that. But right now, while we're solving your technical issue, maybe I could come back to Manoj and Sarah on looking at exactly what we've talked about, but just to say, we don't need to linger on this for too long, but of course, generational differences in the workplace, how do we use those in order to, again, promote equity and equality? Because that's, again, it's kind of another angle on it. Manoj, do you have anything that you can contribute to that?
Yeah, there are different skills that each of the generations bring in, and the ability for them to work together on these diverse skills and support each other. Are initiatives that are usually that we have fulfilled, or we have embedded into the system. So the kind of projects we have done is where not only do senior employees mentor junior employees, but it is reverse mentoring. So younger employees mentor the senior employees in terms of how to use technology more effectively, how to drive that, right? At the same time, we also see that there are many new roles that are emerging. Roles around, for example, one of the big challenges in this world is cybersecurity. And cybersecurity is not just about technology. The biggest and the weakest link in cybersecurity is the people. And sometimes it is not just about young people. You need the seniority of the people who understand the discipline, understand the processes that need to bring in. So by combining multi-generational talent to tackle issues of this nature, younger technology specialists working with senior people with a highly experienced, spent decades in building process excellence in manufacturing or other industries, coming together to solve these unique challenges that exist. These are some of the examples where we see that bringing different age group people to work together actually helps unlock a completely radical new innovation, because every company is struggling to say, I don't have enough cybersecurity professionals. Why go out and look? Why can't you train people from within the organization with these different skill sets to come together to solve these challenges that exist there?
Rebecca, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I'll come to you in a minute. When you start to use the generational aspect, using different generations to support, mentor, coach each other in different ways, sometimes actually you put aside some of the other barriers that have been a problem. So Minaj, I thought that was really interesting. Sarah, I just wanted to come back to you and say, have you seen that in action? Have you seen any examples of where that really is making a difference?
Yes, I think definitely. Women face a lot of different challenges at different ages, right? When they're younger or senior, we talk about ageism, right? When they're at their childbearing age, they have issues, discrimination against maternity leave, for example. In Hong Kong, actually, is actually quite serious. Working mothers and caretakers, they have obligations and they might want to take more flexibility than the others. I think at the end of the day, it's how do we take those examples and highlight that it would work and share it across organizations internally and externally. There are a lot of community organizations, NGOs or think tanks in Hong Kong who would advocate the success cases, because we don't highlight them enough, and a lot of women just suffer in silence. But actually, those challenges they're faced by a lot of other women within or outside of the organization, because you're working in the same culture, you're working in the same market, the same rules and regulations apply. So we need more platforms like that to allow women to safely and transparently share, their struggles, their challenges, but then how do they get resolved? And highlight those successful cases for others so that they know what can be done.
Thank you very much. I do think that some of these examples really bring the issues to life. So, Thasara, I do think we've solved the IT glitch there, and I wanted to come back to you about that question with the microaggressions and then negating the positive steps. So can you comment on that? Oh no, we've lost you again. Oh dear. So Thasara, we can't hear you.
Can we try again? Can you hear me?
Now we can. Excellent. Over to you.
Okay, excellent. Wonderful. I was just saying that I was going to say a few words on the generation gap, but we can always discuss that later. So I will just go back to your question and talk about this microaggression, because I heard, I've read this. Amy Cuddy, one professor in Harvard Business School, has said that sexism is not a glass ceiling, it's a labyrinth of micro inequities that add up over a lifetime. So this gender equality, one of the most challenging barriers to address, are the subtle and almost invisible everyday indignities that many women feel or see as microaggression. I mean, in definition, microaggression we've got here as the brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or sometimes unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative, insults type of things. As many people face these type of microaggression because it's so micro that we think that it's so little that sometimes it gets passed by. Because, it could be just a slight put down or sometimes passed off as a joke and, like a double meaning thing, or sometimes as an inference of you assume them to be excluded from the dominant group. So you just undermine the other person. So, and for gender, that definitely happens. So this sometimes, because of the smallness of this incident, this micro makes you that it's an interpersonal thing that you should be, you should man up or woman up and just handle it. So, but it's still not right to do that, because it sometimes happen in the individual level. Sometimes it goes into the company level, that it becomes a norm for the whole organization. So people have to be zero tolerant for these type of microaggressions or discrimination, whether it's language or the behavior that happens. I mean, the managers should set the standards by providing training, or it could be like we can make it a topic for people to discuss on microaggression, because of this nature of this, how it insults people and how they make the other people feel belittled, that HR professionals should make a note of it and ensure such things don't necessarily happen. For example, there was at a place that I worked before, there were two religious Islamic ladies, because of the way they dressed in a particular attire, Islamic attire. Both of them were called the same name, Fatima. So, and they both had very beautiful names, unique names. But for some reason, they were just being called that because maybe they had that name as part of them, but there was no reason for not identify them as two different people. So it was very offensive to them, but they just thought that it's not the place to voice it out, but because it's still. So, but what happened was, when it was brought to the management, they decided that we should ensure that everybody knows everyone's name. Let's have a workshop, let's have a training session where everybody gets to know everybody's name. So some of the names that we didn't even wanted to really know for the work that we did, like the cleaning staff names and all that, everybody, the name of a person was made important. So ultimately, getting better at noticing and responding to microaggression and being aware of it really brought so much harmony to the workplace, because it affects everyone. It creates this it makes people don't feel inclusive, or they feel that they are not part of the whole organization or the culture. So I mean, because of that fear that they create due to this microaggression, women feel that they don't want to be working no more, that there are so many things that others also can learn, they can evolve and grow and bring that equality among people. And I can list a few things that managers can do, but I don't know how the time is going on, Rebecca. So over to you. You can decide how we can.
Thank you. So I have noticed the time, and it's such a shame because I feel like we could talk about this for longer, and it would be nice to get really some final thoughts. But I wanted us to be able to take as many questions as we could from our listeners today. And actually, you have all, as panelists, done a great job of offering not just your thoughts from your experience, but also some examples to really bring some of these things to life, and also some suggestions on what can be done in the workplace or in life, just sort of generally, in order to really start to affect change. So I am mindful of time. I was told very clearly that at 58 minutes past the hour, I was to hand it back to Samantha. And so that just leaves me to thank all three of you very, very much for participating and for your thoughts and your experience, and also to thank the listeners for being part of this, and for many of you sharing some really interesting questions and giving us an opportunity to broaden out this discussion further. So thank you very much. And I will hand us over to Samantha.
All right, so thank you very much. That's it for today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you, Professor Dr. Rebecca, Dr. Tessara, Sarah, and Manoj for your insights and expertise. Don't forget, if you are a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. And if you're not yet a member or subscriber, you can join our community via the link that's also in the live chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. You can also sign up for free to the CMI newsletter for the latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.